Good afternoon, everyone. I'm David Talbot, Managing Director and Head of Research at Red Cloud Securities. And this is the final session of the conference. So thank you, everyone, for being part of a very successful pre-PDAC conference. Our final presenter is Steve Cope. He's President and CEO of Silver Viper Minerals. Now, Silver Viper is exploring for precious metals in La Virginia Gold Silver Project in Sonora, Mexico. So Steve, you have 15 minutes to present, and then we'll come back with 5 minutes of Q&A. And so why don't you take it away?
Thanks, David, and thanks everyone for taking time to listen in and get an update on the Silver Viper story. I will be making some forward-looking statements there, so I'll draw everyone's attention to that slide. When you're looking to invest in a precious metals exploration company, I think there's three things that you really need to be focused on. One, that it's got a high-quality asset. Two, that it still has lots of potential. And three, that it's got strong management shareholder behind it. We certainly have all three of those, and as we move through the presentation, we'll touch on why it is all three of those things. The project is located in eastern Sonora in Mexico in the Sierra Madre. You take a paved highway 220 kilometers east of Hermosillo to the local town of Corichico, and from there we're about 30 minutes in on a gravel and dirt road. This particular trend in Mexico is highly underexplored. There's really no modern operations outside of Dolores, which is just across the border into Chihuahua, 100K to the south. And El Tigre, which Silver Tiger Minerals has 90K to our north. That was a past producing mine. In between, there's been no modern exploration outside of the discovery at La Virginia and the work that Minefinders, Pan Am, and us have done on that project. Minefinders flew this whole mountain range looking for another Dolores, and they settled on La Virginia being the lookalike. And then when they were bought for $1.5 billion by Pan American Silver, the project went on the shelf until we got involved in 2018. At that point, we were able to bring the project back together and consolidate the whole land package, and subsequently made a discovery at an area of the project called El Ruby. Here you can see the claims package as they stand now. We own 100% already of everything in red. That was the claims that we acquired from Pan American Silver for a 2% NSR. And then the claims in the blue where all the historic work was done and where we made our discovery at El Ruby. You can see again there the option payments. So we're 3 years in. They're escalating payments, and the last one will be the $2.5 million owed June 2023. Half of that can be paid in shares at our discretion. Pan Am has their 2% NSR on the project, and we have a right to buy back the 2% NSR that sits just on the blue claims. So again, from that other option agreement, we can buy it for $2 million in the first 5 years or $3 million for the life of the project after that. The image on the right here is definitely, been the game changer for us and for the project, and that is a picture of the El Ruby Plateau. Where we made our discovery was just off to the right of that large silicified dike. You can see kind of sitting there, sticking out like a sore thumb. And it's really important that people appreciate that image because you can see kind of the mountainous terrain around the area. But El Ruby sitting on a 2K by 2K flat plateau is very favorable for open pit mining, and that's become very important for us based on our discovery there and our discovery 100 meters to the west on the western side of that plateau. It's really a combination of our high-grade breccia structure and then the low-grade footwall that breccia structure has, as well as that structure 100 meters to the west. And those combined make for a very attractive open pit heap leach operation to start here. We will be expanding on that, our maiden resource that we came out with last year on that portion of the project, moving especially to the north and to the south that we've already filled in the 300 meters to the bottom of that arroyo. And in the very shortly here, and probably in the next month and a half, we'll start testing a deeper contact and starting to try and build an underground resource at El Ruby. Again, here you can see a picture of El Ruby and that silicified dike. And the structures that I just mentioned. Our most favorable horizon so far for mineralization has been in that lower andesite package that you can see outlined there. Once we get into the rhyolites, we still follow our structures, but it's a much tighter rock. We don't see the same widths and grades that we see up in the lower andesites. But what I mentioned that we're going to be testing it and growing it at depth, and that is going to follow the geophysics program that we're excited to finally say is starting here in about a week or so. It's been a long time. It was supposed to start last August. It's been difficult for Quantec to get their gear into Mexico, but they finally gotten us the gear. Their people are flying down to start the program, and so we're going to run a 40-day deep penetrating geophysics program, and on the back end of that we're going to be bringing in a larger rig and start testing El Ruby at depth. And what we're going to be looking for is the contact that will exist below the rhyolite package, which we'll expect will be the metasediment package. And at that particular contact in this type of system, you can, if it's the type of system we believe it is, will contain bonanza grades of gold and base metals and some silver. and we're really excited for the potential there. We had Crescat Capital take a large investment in the company on the last placement, and they did that because Quinton Hennig had identified that this is that type of system, a gold carbonate base metal system, and they part of their investment was that we needed to test that. This particular piece of core here is another example of what we're getting some of those types of materials that where you see some elevated base metals here with 1.8% copper, 3% lead, almost 3% zinc. And this is stuff that's been blasted up from deep in the system up into our main breccia structure. We don't see this, continuously from, every half meter or meter. You get a half meter of this and then you don't see it in the rest of a hole. So again, this is something that's coming up from deeper. Again, it's another just signal that we're onto one of these types of systems, but for the most part, we've had negligible base metals up in the first, 300, 350 meters of this system. Again, I mentioned El Ruby's been our main event. Here you can see the man-portable rig that I think really is why we were able to get into Ruby. When Minefinders and Pan American were exploring on the project, they were using large track-mounted rigs, bulldozing in roads. We've been able to, go anywhere on the project really with these man-portable rigs. They're easy to move around. We use mules from the staging area to carry the core back and forth and the fuel needed for the rig. We've been doing a lot of work on recycling water, even though we've got water year round here. It's been important, from an ESG standpoint, that we've been putting pressure on the drillers to use, all the latest technology that they can to make sure that we're recycling and using as much of the water as possible. But using this type of rig in that setup, we reuse all the lumber from pad to pad, and when we're done, you can throw some seat down, and within a couple of weeks, you can't even tell that there was a drill there, other than you'll see the collar sticking up out of the ground. Here you can see our maiden resource that came out in Q2 last year, and this was designed around essentially an open pit heap leach operation. The average open pit mine in the area for heap leach operates about a 0.5 gram gold average grade. Most of them don't have much silver in them, but we certainly have a very appreciable amount of silver associated with it as well. And in our metallurgy, we've seen that the silver leaches quite well. So this, puts us in a position where almost over double the average grade of what a lot of the operations are operating at. We've got 0.9 in our inferred and 0.8 in our indicated at El Ruby for the gold grades. And then we've got another 0.5 gram gold equivalent of silver grades as well. So again, we're off to a really good start, but it's just that we've got lots of room to continue to expand Ruby, both along strike and at depth. We've already filled in the 300 meters coming off the Arroyo to the south, and then on the back end of the geophysics, we'll be using the man-portable rig to try and expand Ruby to the north as well. Here, just quickly, you can see what was left. This image in the top left here that shows the open pit that was put on the resource for El Ruby. And again, you can see some of the block model was left out of that. And we didn't have enough tons there to include an underground resource, but just that block model ran about 7,000 tons of 15 grams gold and 300 silver. So there's definitely a good, high grade portion that's our main breccia El Ruby structure that certainly can support underground mining if we find enough of it. And then you can see the historic area of the project where Minefinders and Pan Am worked, and there's a lot of ounces there outside of the resource based on the gold price that we used and the terrain. But I mean, again, as metals prices move up and people are mining this, there's a lot of additional ounces outside of that resource that are located below those small pits that were put on the resource there. This was the first. Here's a cross section of one at El Ruby, and this was really the section that showed us we were very much onto something different than your traditional Mexican epithermal system. You can see on that hole that we're hitting high grade gold and silver right at surface, and then again down 300 meters we were still hitting high grade gold and silver. And some of our best samples to date, I mean, that was a 20 meter wide zone running 363 silver and 20 grams gold, which obviously anyone would be very excited to hit results like that. But again, we didn't have much base metals associated. I think there was only 1.5 meter there that had that kind of chunky high grade base metals associated with the high grade gold and silver. So again, that this is the andesites, but really at depth, we're expecting that deeper contact is going to be potentially a massive win for this type of deposit. And around the world, these types of deposits, if the model holds true, are multi-million ounce, gold and base metal type projects. So very exciting, and we're thrilled that we're finally going to get a chance to test that on the back end of this geophysics program. So like I said, that drill should start in about 2 months, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we can run into one of these types of, or prove up that it's one of these types of deposits. I mentioned that we've kind of filled in the 300 meters to the south of when the resource was done. This is the data that cut off for the resource. So moving down that arroyo, we've hit mineralization throughout that, and again, so that's going to add a bunch of ounces to the existing resource. To the north, it looks like we're into a down drop block, so we're going to wait, like we said, for this geophysics program to identify kind of what's happened as we move north on El Ruby. But again, I would expect that pit design will certainly change once we can prove up that down drop block model to the north. I mentioned metallurgy. This was the first step. We sent some samples off to a university in Hermosillo, showed us, we're hosted in argentite, gold and silver alloyed as electrum. We didn't expect that there would be any problems with metallurgy based on that. And then we did some simple bottle roll tests, saw gold recoveries all over 90 to 5% across all the different grade ranges, and silver recoveries were very good for leaching, and especially the low grade silver sitting there at 76%. So again, that bodes very well. The recovery times were good. That was a great first pass, and as we move forward, we'll dial that in even further. While we've been waiting for the geophysics, we had moved the MAM portable rig up to start testing the first of our regional targets, which was the Paradonis prospect, 2 kilometers to the, or 1.5 kilometers to the east of El Ruby. We haven't put out any results or seen any results from that yet. From what we can tell, we're not quite into anything as good as El Ruby yet, but we've definitely hit mineralization. We've hit another breccia structure. And what we've seen along this whole trend is where you really got to vector in is where you get a flexure in the total structure. So at El Ruby, we get a slight degree change of this regional structure that runs for 100+ kilometers. So in this potential parallel structure that we have to the east, it would be the same thing. We'd be looking for a flexure. We've certainly hit sniffs. Our XRF gun shows that we're in mineralized breccia, but it's not quite the same material yet that we see at El Ruby. So we'll continue to explore along that. It certainly looks like there's going to be additional discoveries to be made on that eastern flank. Whether that's up at La Colmena or down off into the El Molino area where we've got some additional targets to test. Ruby North sits in the same structure as where we are at El Ruby at the end of that plateau. You see La Gloria on the map. That's a different beast in itself. That's a large porphyry target sitting in a 3 kilometer by 3 kilometer zone of alteration. We're certainly not focused on that now, but at some point in this project that'll be worthy of some deep drill holes. We still are very excited about the Macho Libre target, which has about 2 kilometers of potential strike length south of El Ruby. We put some holes into it over a year ago, and we're high up in the system there, but hit some spikes of mineralization. So again, we want to go back and test that a little bit deeper. It's a very target-rich environment, and I'll be shocked if we don't make additional discoveries in this area on the project. Here you can see just where we're at kind of from a share count and some of our large institutional investors. There's a 20 to 30 different funds that own the stock. You can see management owns 23%. That's a staple of all the Belcara Group companies. Management believes the best place to invest is in ourselves. And I think it's very important when you're looking to invest in a exploration company that, management does have a lot of skin in the game. But again, and not just from the beginning, let's say you can see Gary, myself, Dale, all of us picking away in the market at various points. And, we firmly believe in this story. Dave, who's hosting the call, you can reach out to Red Cloud if you'd like to see his research report on the company. Again, I think he does a very good job with that report and shows, from a third party why it's a good investment. So I don't need to go too much into that, but reach out to Dave if you'd like to chat with him about his report and what he thinks of the project. The price is actually a little bit low there. I think we're at about 50 or 51 cents right now. And then you can see our ticker symbols. One of the things that we've really had that I think has been great has been our QB listing. We've really picked up a lot of volume in the US and brought in a whole kind of new wave of investors to the company on the US retail side, and that's credit to the work that we do with Red Cloud, as well as a number of the other groups that are kind of championing the cause for silver and gold and what's going on around right now. So we've been very happy with the volume that we've seen on that QB listing. And so I guess the other one, I won't spend too much time on it, but it's become very important over the last few years that we include a lot of this in our presentation. It's something that we've always done, but your ESG, your environmental and community stuff, we are very involved with local communities. Most of our workforce comes from those local communities, and we've had an overwhelming level of support for our project and in those communities. But doing various environmental types of activities, supporting the local community. We've been providing medicine during COVID to help combat stuff that's gone on in the local communities when they've had little outbreaks, medical equipment, supporting sports teams. If you name it, we're an exploration company, we're not flush with a lot of cash, but it's still important that we keep those relationships up and have that good relation with the local communities. Just in summary, we've got a high quality asset. We're in a mining friendly jurisdiction, strong management and technical team, lots of potential, strong shareholder support. We can upgrade that well financed. We will be doing a financing at some point here, probably on the back end of the geophysics, but we will be, like I said, that last placement was done last June, and moving forward, well, obviously we're an exploration company. We're going to need to keep raising cash, but we're sitting about 1.5 million in the till right now. With that, we can open up for questions, and thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you very much, Steve. Great presentation. So just wanted to start off with a couple logistical questions. I guess your cash position, 1.5 million. What's your cost per meter for drilling? And when you are drilling, what sort of lab delays are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, we're around 150 US all in a meter with assays, which around the world is pretty cheap relative to a lot. Assay time is the constant weird one that's fluctuating like crazy, it seems, from month to month. Right now, it seems to have sped up a bit. I think we're getting down closer to probably about a month wait time, at least for the last little bit, but it got as slow as 3, 4, 5 months there for a while. I don't know, as we move back into when stuff in Canada and the Golden Triangle picks back up, whether it slows down again or not, because our multi-elements are run in Vancouver, so you start competing with those companies for that lab space. But things seem to be moving a little bit quicker now, so hopefully, fingers crossed, it stays like that, like it was pre-COVID.
Yep. Okay. Well, hopefully people are allowed back in the labs, closer
Yes,
space.
now that would be a big part of it. Whether it's in the labs or sitting out front and preparing all the core at the warehouse in Hermosillo.
Exactly, exactly. Now you mentioned focus on the environment by reclaiming those drill pads as you go. How's your social license and government support on the ESG side too?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't had any issues. Again, with the man portable rig, and because we leave such a low footprint, we've never had a problem permitting. We've been permitted to drill all over the project anywhere we've kind of wanted to. Every time we've gone and got our permits from Semernap. So I mean, I'll knock on wood, but I think we've done a great job with that, Dale and the team, and we've got good people in place to handle that, and it has never been an issue for us.
Okay. And this is a relatively underexplored area. The trend is about 6.4 kilometers long strike, but there's a gap just south of El Ruby there. Is that a matter of difficult access or lack of drilling or just, just crappy rocks?
Lack of drilling. No, like I said, I mentioned it briefly. That's the Macho Libre area that's got 2 kilometers of potential strike in that area. We had some success on the southern end of that with the first program we put into it. And what we saw, though, was as a whole, we seem to be just higher up in the system with where those holes were. So that's, at some point, we're going to go back and test that at just a bit of a deeper depth and try and find that same level where we had success at El Ruby. But no, I mean, Macho Libre looks very good, and our team is very high on that target. It's just vectoring in again on the best spot within that. But we've got mineralization with, appreciable gold and silver on the northern end of it. We had some pretty good numbers on the southern end. It's just figuring out exactly where to best drill on that. But no, that's still a very big target, and it would be very odd to me if that 2 kilometer gap didn't contain something, another one of these pods of mineralization, because you go from Las Huatas to Con Virginia to La Virginia to El Oriental, and then you say you've got this big 2 kilometer gap sitting there where you've got mineralization, but you haven't really, developed one of these deposits yet. So no, I fully expect that we'll find something in Macho Libre as well.
Okay. And your current resource right now that you put out last May, does that support an open pit at this point, or is it too early to start a PEA in your eyes?
I would probably do a PA after the next resource. I certainly think that it does support an open pit already. Like the average operation in the state tends to start at about 500,000 ounces of gold and doesn't have any silver associated with it, or very little. So I think we've already met kind of that threshold for small producers. We want to grow this and find something that's going to be of a size and interest to the big major mining companies. So until we cut off El Ruby, to the north and the south and at depth, I don't think we'll move toward a PEA. So that's why I say probably after our next resource, we would probably start work on a PEA.